everybody. I'm practicing malaguena on my plastic porcelain. Just sort of finishing up this whole series on the plastic ukuleles turned into a series. And that's, stop saying I just wanted to point out that as you've seen in other videos, you can do whatever kind of playing you want on these plastic instruments. I've been working on malaguena for some time. I'm working on memorizing, and I've gotten about the first third done. I'm still fumbling at some points, but you can practice classical music on these little $25 plastic ukuleles. You can strum these plastic ukuleles. There's a guy on YouTube called Garage Funk that did some, funk, like rock type videos with his. And so that being the case, I've mentioned before, they're fun to play with, they're fun to tinker with. I just wanted to end this series by paying my respects to what many consider, or the person who many consider to be the father of all plastic ukuleles, and that is Mario McAfee. I'll set my porcelain down. You see, Mario McAfee did not make the first plastic ukulele. Mattel made the first plastic ukulele, and I believe it was called the Ukadoodle. And it must have come around out in the late 40s or 50s range, somewhere, probably 40s, I'm guessing, in that range. But anyway, the thing about it is that Mario McAfee was an accomplished luthier, and he was also a concert guitarist, and so he had all that experience when it came to making plastic ukuleles. And I'm not going to give a whole detailed biography of his life. This is just going to be a little snippet. There's some great articles online, and my favorite of the articles is written by someone by the name, and I'm not going to pronounce his last name right, but it's something like Sandor Neglezansky. And if you just look up Mario McAfee and then just type Sandor after that, you'll get his article. And the reason I mention his article is because there are numerous articles about Mario McAfee, about his ukuleles, and some of the details differ, and Sandor took the time to actually get to meet and get to know Mario McAfee, so if there are some details a little different in one versus the other, I would trust Sandor. I've purchased books that he's written on different woodworking subjects in the past. He's a very thorough author. He really does his homework, and so if you're going to trust someone, an individual, an author writing an article, I'm just putting my word out to his article. Once again, Sandor Neglezansky or something like that. Just look up Mario McAfee and then add Sandor to it, and it'll come up on most search engines. Anyway, Mario McAfee, to make everything really short, was, as I said, a concert guitarist. He had a swimming injury sometime in the 30s, and when that happened, he could no longer play at the level that he used to play at. And so, one thing led to another. He got into plastics manufacturing, but he wasn't making instruments. And then he had a chance meeting with Arthur Godfrey, who was the #1, celebrity of the day. And they played some music together, and Arthur Godfrey basically said, you can make a plastic ukulele, because Mario told him about his idea. He said, if you can make one and it plays well, I can sell them. And so that's what Mario McAfee did. He spent some time researching the right plastics to get the right tone, because being a luthier, tone was very important to him. And so he finally settled on Styron by Dow, and I believe it's some form of a polystyrene, but Dow was formulation. But he chose it because it had a real wood-like tone to it. And he also chose the specific nylon strings because they had a warmth to them and added to the tone. You notice there's a pillow right here, because there's something very special behind that pillow. It's one of the prized ukuleles in my collection. I don't have an Islander, but out of the same mold, Mario McAfee made a whole bunch of different variations. And one of the ones he made is the TV pal. right here. And they were made off of the, you know, the Martin style soprano. But the little details that Mario put into these instruments is amazing. Now, first off, the original Islanders actually had metal tuning pegs. And they had bridges. This TV POW was like budget of the budget line, so it just has like little tubes molded into it that have slots. So you have like a little slotted, looks like a, back then they would call it a very futuristic looking, you know, pseudo bridge. It works great. These were designed with 0 frets. That was fantastic. Now, a lot of people don't understand 0 frets, and actually it's as good a time as any to explain it, because as some people say 0 frets help with intonation. Yes and no, because the fact is this: when you put a 0 fret on an instrument, like I did just recently for a client, because in his case, his instrument, all of the frets from 1 to the end were the proper spacing for a soprano, but from the nut to the first fret was the spacing for like a concert ukulele. So the proper fix then was a 0 fret that actually fixed the intonation. However, you know, if a nut's in the right spot, then it's the intonation itself would be just as good as if a 0 fret is in the right spot. What a 0 fret does is it creates a similarity of tone in terms of open strings and fretted strings, because everything's going over the fret as opposed to coming out of the nut. So when you're looking at sound differences and how to modify sound, you start changing saddles. You can change saddle materials. Your strings change things. You can change nut materials. But if you have 0 fret, it just takes one thing out of the equation, and it gives just that much more uniform tone. So why would someone want to put one in a molded instrument? Well, from a practical standpoint, from a injection molding standpoint, getting the frets right in a mold is no problem whatsoever. But there could be a possibility in a mold with these slots to be sometimes a little tighter or a little looser. So with a 0 fret, you could actually set the mold up so the slots are a little bit generous in their width and not get buzzing that you would get if you didn't have a 0 fret. I'm theorizing that's probably why Mario put these in here, because the slots are fairly wide and there is no problem whatsoever with the way it plays. The action is really low. Well, it's extremely low now, especially because after, what, 50 plus years of existence, this thing has bowed in a little bit, even though it does have really nice bracing on the inside, you know, molded bracing. This is special to me because throughout my life, I always remembered seeing something that had this unusual pattern and color. Let me take that back. I always remember as a child I had something with this pattern and color, and I could remember what it was. I also remember as an adult I always loved playing ukulele, and then I read this article on Mario McAfee, and I saw the ukulele and then the pattern he called simulated rosewood, and it's like, oh my God, I remember. I had one of those. But as a child, my parents didn't know anything about music, and they they certainly didn't know. They bought me something that was actually a legitimate instrument that happened to be plastic. So I would just, and that's about the extent of what I could do. And I always thought, boy, it sure would be neat to be able to actually play this, because they're playable. That's what Mario did that was different. He actually approached the plastic ukulele not as a toy, but as a legitimate playable instrument that just happened to be made out of plastic. And these things are very playable. I will say the strumming machines. They really sound best strummed. Start here. See, it's just got a lot of volume. It's got a lot of punch. You can play scales on it. It's when you start going up and down the fretboard that you notice some of the weaknesses of this particular plastic. And I'm not going to say the way it was designed, because plastic ages and it gets a little more brittle as it ages in time. And so you sound nice as it sounds now, it might have been even a little warmer back then. I have Fremont black lines on it because black lines do have a warm sound, and I tend to like to put that on vintage instruments because they're a medium tension, so they don't pull as hard. And since plastic does get brittle over time, these are easier on the instrument. But these are definitely strumming machines. I mean, you could do finger style, but you start hearing, some of the weakness. And because of how low the action is for an adult hands playing on this, it's a little more challenging. You can tell it just doesn't have the, I won't say clarity, it's just some of the notes get a little dead. If you play scales up the neck, you can really hear what I'm talking about. See, it plays them, it's just there's, as my wife says, it just sounds like a plastic instrument. You can do chord melodies. You can do whatever you want on them. They just don't have the punch that you'd get on like a more modern plastic instrument, or definitely not on a nice wood instrument. But you can play them, and they're so fun to play. I just wanted to really mention that, sometimes the simplest things can be so amazing, yet they don't just happen. There is someone that starts every neat movement, and all these plastic instruments that you see today, the Vorsons, the Corollas, the Fusion, the Kala, especially the Kala Waterman. It was actually made as like an homage to the original McAfee Islander. But all these plastic instruments really had their beginning, so to speak, with the grandfather of all those instruments being the original McAfee Islander, because there was a person that was a legitimate luthier, was a concert guitarist that happened to be in plastics manufacturing, that saw the potential of this new material at the time to make legitimate instruments. And I'm so glad he did. And it's amazing where they have come in the subsequent years. There are plastic instruments that go from $25 up to very expensive plastic instruments. And, got to understand that HPL, high pressure laminate, basically the Formica type instruments, those fit the definition of plastic, because plastics, if you look up a dictionary definition of plastics are organic materials made out of organic fibers with organic resins. And right on, you go to the Formica website and the other variations, you'll say Formica plastic. By definition, Ekoa instruments, the Blackbird, Farallon, and Clara, are plastic instruments. They use flax fiber. It's an organic material. They use, how do you say that? It's not like petroleum-based, but it's like algae or some other bio-based resin. It's renewable organic resin. So they're using organic fibers. They're using organic resins. By dictionary definition, they're the highest end, and I would say among the best sounding plastic instruments that you can get. But it fits within the realm of plastic. And they're legitimate instruments. They're very nice instruments. I've played the Farallon. I've played a Clara. To me personally, they do also suffer from the one-dimensional tonality that you get from composite materials. But they're still very nice. And all of these instruments had their beginning with a luthier and a guitarist by the name of Mario McAfee that saw plastic as a legitimate instrument, a legitimate material for making legitimate instruments, not toys, but instruments, in this case ukuleles, that just happen to be made out of plastic. Anyway, that was all I wanted to share today. I just wanted to sort of end the series on plastics by saying, you know, they're fun, they had a beginning. The beginning was with this wonderful man that really took the material seriously and took the instruments seriously. And they've really come a long ways. From the very low end to the very high end. Yeah, you can get instruments that are actually made out of materials that by definition fit within the realm of what is plastic. That's all I would say. Have a wonderful day. Play your ukuleles, practice your ukuleles. Just have a great day. Thank you.